everybody, and welcome to Chewing the Cud, Season 1, Episode 1. Thank you for having us back. The reception on the original podcast we put up has been fantastic, so here we are doing it for real. This one's a little bit different, our first time online, so if anything goes wrong, we'll blame the joys of technology. But as usual, I have my co-host...
Neil Greggor.
And how you doing, Neil?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Good. And today... Sun's shining, yes, exactly. It's July, we're in the hottest period of the year, so let's make the most of it. Our guest today is Roger Bacon. He is it Key Accounts Manager, I believe that's right?
That's right, yeah.
For Barenbrug, who are probably one of the three major seed houses here in the UK. So welcome, Roger.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here.
Thank you. And so Roger, we thought we'd ask you along to our first proper podcast. Shall we call it that? Yeah. It's the right time of year for it. It's July. Whole crop's already starting to roll. It's a good time to talk grass reseeding, really. So let's start with yourself. Who are you? What's your background? And how do we get to where you are today?
Okay, yeah. So I'm Roger Bacon. I work for Barenbrug UK. I'm the agricultural key accounts manager, so I look after sort of the main accounts throughout England and Wales, supported by a couple of guys down in the east and southeast, part of a team of 5. So I've also got a colleague up in Scotland and over in Northern Ireland as well. How did I get here? That's an interesting question because I've spent
Are you from an agricultural background? I guess is a good place to start.
I am from an agricultural background. I grew up on a farm. It was a mixed farm, but all I wanted to do when I was younger was drive big tractors. So
Sounds familiar.
I pursued that line and ended up working on a sort of large arable farm in Nottinghamshire, and that's where I sort of fell upon agronomy, and from then on pursued a career in agronomy.
So you're an agronomist and you've moved over more into, I guess, seed trials, seed production, seed sales, I guess. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, that's right. I was involved quite a lot in forage crops and grassland anyway. And I spent some time in New Zealand, and then an opportunity came up within Barenbrug. So I took it, and I'm now in my 8th year with Barenbrug.
Cool. Must be enjoying it, because I mean I met you last year. Was August, something like that last year? I think it was.
Yeah, last August.
Yeah, when I had the chance to visit your trials in Worcester, which were very interesting, and I'll come on back to something along those lines moving forward. But I mean, day to day, what do you do now for Barenbrug?
It's kind of like an all-encompassing role. You know, we're a small team, so it's pretty much hands-on for everybody. We this time of year we're sort of supporting our distributor customers out in the field with technical queries, and also supporting their farmer customers with anything and everything to do with reseeding, establishment issues. So it's if there's any problems to do with grass and growing forage crops, we're generally sort of in there helping sorting things out.
Cool. So as I say, it's July. For some people, whole crops coming off, but really it's the prime time. Majority of reseeding happens in the autumn. We're right time of year to be talking about it, so thought, hey, let's make the most of it. So whether after a whole crop, fairly easy, you've got to do something. But let's say you're looking at reseeding what you've already got. How do you pick? How do you target where you should be reseeding? Some people, it's more obvious than others. Others, it's not. What should you look for? As want people to have a think about what they're doing and why they're doing it. What should they be looking at to say, this is the one I should be reseeding this year, and then we can talk about what they reseed with, etc., etc.
Well, hopefully, farmers are monitoring the grass throughout the season in terms of yield and growth.
So, what grass, Roger? There's none around.
Well, I know. I look out my window now, and our paddocks are brown. So, so there's not a lot.
And I don't get far. I mean, I was up in Leicester yesterday, and they're about the same as it is down here. There's not a lot around.
Yeah. So, it's basically identifying the sort of poorer performing paddocks in terms of either grazing or silage, and what we mean by that is it's not a case of looking over the gate thinking, well, that field's green, we'll just put some more nitrogen on it, because there's with nitrogen at the price it is at the moment, you want to be getting utilisation of every kilogram that you're applying. So if you're not getting that return, then it's time to delve a bit deeper, look into those grass fields, and see how much of the productive grasses are actually there.
I mean, sometimes it can simply be, you know, that when the cows come off that field, they don't milk as well as what they should. That very simply can be, as you say, other people, they'll plate measure, they'll you know, look at what yields have come off, but sometimes you just know anyway, because you know whenever they're in there, they just don't milk as well.
That's right. And silage time, it's fairly easy. A lot of people count the number of bales or the number of trailers they're getting off a field, so it is taking note of those differences, and like I say, getting your feet in the field and having a look at the amount of productive grasses that are in there. So if you've got we developed a system called the Barenbrug Good Grass Guide, which is an indexing system based on 5 indices. It's fairly straightforward. Index 1 is a field that would need reseeding, so it's probably got 25% or less of productive grasses, so it's not worth improving. So that field would be destined for a total reseed. On the opposite end of the scale, a field with an index of 5 has got 80% plus productive grasses, so ryegrasses or sown species of the previous lay, and may just need some sort of tweaking of the management, and that could be in terms of, you know, fertilizer or a bit of weed control. So it's
what about, or what's the word, aerating?
Or aerating, yeah. So compaction is a big issue in terms of grass yield loss. So you can, compaction can cause about 20% yield loss of grass. So okay, not this year, but in a wet time, if you've got contractors running around with heavy kit keen to get on, then you can cause some serious issues and therefore serious grass loss, yield loss.
Exactly, and for all of us, as you say, you mentioned nitrogen. We can't just keep chucking bags of nitrogen at it. We've got to make the most of what we've got. So we've got to ensure the compaction's not there. We've got to ensure that we've got the covers we want. We've got that it's all happening. So as you say, you're getting that return on investment by putting the nitrogen on. There's no point putting it on poor grass when it's just not going to yield, whether it's milk or beef, whatever. You want to make sure it's going to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, very much so. And an old, what we would class sort of an old sward that contains 50% sort of weed species, the best kind of nitrogen utilization you're going to get off that field is sort of 30 to 40%. So you're wasting 60 to 70% of anything that you're putting on. So
which, you know, if you look at where's latest let's take nitram as the thing. Look at the latest nitram price. That's probably going to cost you what, 500 quid. Just not being used or not being utilized as effectively as it could be.
Yeah, exactly. And those older swards will probably, yield around 5.5, 6, 7 tons of dry matter. So you're getting very little off them, and it's not that nutritional either. The nutritional value of the feed is very poor.
So let's say you've got a good, you say 5 or 6 ton yield. That's per acre or per hectare? We talking
per hectare.
Just so we clarify, we're all talking new money, not old money.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's say okay, good, really productive lay. What would you expect?
Anywhere between sort of 15 to 17 tons of dry matter. It depends on the mix you're putting in there. So if it's a sort of a longer term perennial ryegrass lay, you're probably looking at sort of near, the 15 ton plus. Italians, I'd be looking at 17, 18 tons.
But you're effectively saying three times production by having a good lay compared to one that's only 50% there. I mean, that's massive just in terms of energy values, therefore in terms of what milk yields you'll get. All of these things just come off it. And let's be honest, despite we mentioned the cost of fertilizer, still your cheapest feed is grass, whether that's grazing it or ensiling it. And from nutrition point of view, the better the quality of your grass, the better the quality of your silage, the easier my life is, and the less I have to spend your money on whatever needs to go in there to get the protein and the energy up to spec. If it's there to start with, happy days. It makes my life a lot easier and your pocket a lot, well, your expenses a lot cheaper.
Yeah, and the return on the investment, you mentioned return on investment of reseeding earlier on, is speaks for itself. You're looking at something like 900 with increase in fuel and fertilizer, about 960 quid a hectare for a total reseed at the moment. That includes sort of spraying, ploughing, cultivation. So that's everything in, and that's based on contractors' costs. But if you calculate the extra dry matter produced, then it more than pays for the cost of the reseed in the first year. So
it's worth doing.
Very much so. Yeah. Yeah.
And to be honest with you, even then, people reseed. How do I put it? I think reseeding is one of those things you don't need to scrimp and save on. And I know it's easy for me to say that, but sometimes the difference in cost per an acre can be, let's say, £10 a bag. But the difference of what you'll get out of that £10 is massive. So really, let's say 20-acre field, and we're going to keep switching between old and new money, I'm sure. But that's an extra £200, whereas you're going to get far more than that back in terms of your return on investment if you invest in the better quality grasses, the better mixes, the better new lays.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the grass seed is a small part of the total reseed cost. You're probably looking at around £150, so a hectare. So with that total 960, it's a small part.
It's what sixth or whatever it is of the total cost, which is not a lot at all. So okay, I'm Mr. Farmer. I want to do a reseed. What should I be looking at, or what should I be looking for when it comes to doing a reseed? Or for what seed mixes, I should say. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it starts even before you're looking at seed mixtures. If we take a step back and go back to the field, you've identified the field that is poor performing, but there's a couple of things, questions that we need to ask is, why is it poor performing? Is it just down to the fact that it's got a low percentage of productive grasses in there, but why has it got a low percentage? And we need to start by not just looking above ground, but also assessing what's going on beneath the ground as well. And that starts with, we talked about compaction. So dig a couple of soil pits and see if there's any compaction there, see what worm activity is like, assess the soil structure, but also more importantly as well, we need to take soil samples to assess the fertility status of the soil. So we need,
I was going to say P's, K's, pHs. I mean, really, that is probably one of the greatest return on investments, isn't it? Is getting your pHs right. If you've got your pHs right, it will make a massive difference for you. And really, spreading lime's not massively expensive unless it's suddenly changed with recent rises in cost. But it's always been relatively cheap compared to other things you can do.
Yeah, well, I mean, the optimum pH for grass is 6, and if you've got legumes or clovers in the mix, then you really want it to be 6.5. When you drop to suboptimal pH of 5.5, you can lose 30% yield again just by unavailability of nutrients.
Makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
You add that on to the compaction, that 20%. That's the equivalent of either filling or half filling a silage pit.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's those low pHs that sometimes can encourage those weed grasses, isn't it? Rather than productive grasses that we were talking about. So okay, you've assessed your soils, they're where they want to be. I guess ultimately then your next decision is what you're going to use that field for, isn't it, in terms of what mixes you use?
Yeah. So is it going to be for cutting? Is it going to be a grazing field? Is it going to be a bit of both? And equally, how long do you want that field to last, that grass field to last for? Is it going to be short term, sort of 2 to 3 years, or is it going to be more long term?
Okay, and then what's the difference between a diploid and a tetraploid? Because I know they have different roles in different things, don't they?
They do.
What mixes you do?
They do, yeah. So a diploid has 2 sets of chromosomes, and a tetraploid has 4 sets of chromosomes. So it's got double the amount of cells basically, and bigger cells. So and that means that in terms of the tetraploid, it's got a higher content of sugars, starches, and basically more energy. So the tetraploids are much more vigorous and not necessarily want to use the word aggressive, but they have more go about them. So if you were looking in terms of, say, an overseeding lay, we would use high, all tetraploids to get the lay to get the mix to be able to compete with existing grasses that are already there. But so that's in essence that's the main difference. That they're a bit more open. Diploids tend to be a lot more sort of finer leaved and a lot denser, so they sort of fill the bottom of the sward.
And say simply the way I always think about it, tetraploid goes up and is for cutting, diploid goes out and is more for grazing. Is that a fair comment?
That's fair comment. Yeah.
So I mean, obviously, these days we're not going to cover it so much today. I mean, we're talking obviously ryegrass. We've pretty most are ryegrass based. I mean, obviously there is a push towards herbal lays and going away from effectively the monoculture of what we've been doing over the years. But I guess we're talking more the traditional ryegrass lays today. But then where does it go from there? I mean, how do you? I guess traditionally you would say red clover is for cutting, white clover is for grazing, but I know that's not quite the same these days, is it?
No, to some extent, but I mean, red clover is more suited to cutting. I mean, the main differences, apart from the colour, obviously, of the flower, red clover grows from a crown, which is a sort of an above root sort of system, above ground sort of system, and if that's grazed, and it's obviously difficult to control grazing animals, but if that's grazed hard, it can affect the persistency of the red clover and the yield of it, the regrowth. And it's the same from a cutting point of view as well, but obviously you've got more control over a mower, so lifting the mower up to leave a decent cutting height will help the persistency of the red clovers.
But I mean, these days as well, isn't it? If you want to, you can use white clover in a cutting lay, but you want to use the medium and big leaf white clovers. That's right, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So the medium and big leaf white clovers will produce sort of quite dense plants, and suitable for cutting, more persistent as well. The red clovers are higher in protein than the white clover, so you're probably looking around 20%, 20 to 22% for a red clover, and sort of 15% for white clover.
Yeah, so and then you'd use the small and medium for grazing in terms of the white clovers.
That's right. Yeah.
And dare I say it, I mean, some people aren't keen on red clovers because they take a little while to get going and they don't last, but there are now, one of your competitors now has a clover that they claim will last for 5 years given the right management. I mean, that's got to be a good thing, surely, because a good cutting lay or a lay that will last for 5 years is always a good thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we're looking at it ourselves. We have our own clover breeding program in New Zealand, and we're looking at more persistent red clovers. So it, as you say, it ties in with a hybrid mix that's going to last for 4 to 5 years. So you're getting a high quality, high yielding cutting mix that's also going to be high in protein.
Yeah, which has got to be so. So we talked about red and white, the basis there, but some people might say, well, it's grass. So how do you put together a mixture instead of saying I'm just going to use seed A? Why are you going to use A, B, and C? How do you put that mixture together? Why do you put those particular ones together?
Yeah, I mean, just back to your comment there, some people might say it's just grass, and I think, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of farmers who do treat it as grass, but I think we need to get to the mindset of thinking that grass is a crop, and as you said earlier on, grass is the cheapest form of forage or feed on a livestock farm, so it's essentially the most important crop on that farm to feed the cows. But in terms of putting mixtures together, then we look at what we want the mixture to do. So if it's an out and out sort of cutting mixture, sort of short to medium term, I don't know, say a 4 or 5 year mix, we'll select hybrids. We have a good selection of hybrids on the recommended list.
Hybrids?
Yeah, a hybrid ryegrass is a cross between a Italian and a perennial. And we can kind of manipulate the sort of percentages, if you like, of Italian and perennial that's in it. So we have a hybrid called Banfoot that's 7/8 perennial. So you're getting some really good persistency from it, but you're also getting the yield and quality aspects from the Italian as well.
Italian, but yeah, it's that you're in that particular one looking for persistency. You're just giving it that little bit of a boost of the good bits that you want.
That's right. You know what farmers are like. You know, they'll buy a grass mix that's for 4 years, but they'll want it in the ground for 6. So value for money.
Ultimately, yes, it depends what they want. But again, how do you choose what goes into
the mixtures?
Into the mixture.
Yeah. We have our own in the UK. We have our own breeding program over in Northern Ireland in conjunction with AFBI. So most of our perennials that we use in the UK come out of that breeding program, and we breed and select varieties based on yield, quality, disease resistance, and persistency as well. So all the varieties go through recommended list testing. We also support those with our own trials as well. So from a combination of the recommended list and data and our own data, we'll select the sort of best varieties to go into mixtures. So if it's a sort of perennial cutting and grazing mixture, or that's predominantly or cutting biased, we'll use perennial varieties that have a tight heading date, probably mostly intermediates. There's more than likely we'll use a higher percentage of tetraploids, and then we'll have some diploids in there to fill the base from the grazing aspect.
How wide is the heading dates on a mix? Usually what, week, 10 days, or a bit more?
Yeah, it can vary. I mean, in a sort of in a mix like our combi, for instance, then it's probably it's only a week. It's as narrow as that. But then if you're looking at the sort of permanent mixtures that are for sort of say set stocked farms, beef and sheep type farms where they want grazing all year round, the heading can be spread through sort of 6 to 8 weeks.
I guess they're not too worried because they want that persistent growth through, don't they, as you say? Whereas if you're going for a cutting mix, it wants to be as tight as possible, so everything's at the same stage at the same time, ideally.
Yeah, that's right. On the longer term type mix, you'd be looking at trying to get an early bite, and good spring early growth, all the way through the summer and into as long into autumn as you can get.
And taking a step back, you mentioned the recommended list, which is always a good place to start, because I know I got my latest copy came last week. It was, I believe. What have you, from your guys' point of view, what have you got to do to get it on that recommended list? Because there's obviously a fair investment to get to that point.
That's right. I mean, it takes somewhere between 15 and 17 years for a new variety to come to market, and that's from deciding that variety A and variety B are then going to produce a cross. So it then goes through multiple trials. This involves about sort of 2,000 plots, more than that actually, and it costs about £500,000 as well. So £500,000 a variety.
I was just about to ask that very question.
Yeah. And then extensive testing on our side before it even gets onto recommended list. So we'll sort of trial it under recommended list sort of scenarios, if you like, so that we know that when we have to pay for varieties to go onto the recommended list testing, once they're on there, you can't pull them off. So we want to be confident that varieties that we're putting forward through list testing are hopefully going to make it.
We're going to make it. Yeah. You don't want it on the list, but the bottom of the list, really, do you?
No.
But I mean, I guess that's ultimately a good place for people to make sure it is on the list, because let's be honest, I've seen mixtures out there that have got older varieties on that are no longer on the official list. Now, they're still going to, I guess you could say there's no such thing as old genetics, just good genetics. But I mean, if they're no longer on the list, they're not as well, you're not going to get the same return on investment, are you? You're not going to get the same production out of them as what you could if you made sure you're using a variety that's on the current list.
Yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a quality control check, if you like. So for varieties to make it onto the recommended list, they have to be significantly better in terms of yield and quality than varieties that are already on there. So inevitably, we can't keep all the varieties on there forever. So some varieties are going to have to drop off. And whilst it, a variety that's not on the list anymore may have been a good variety in its day, it's been superseded by newer, better quality varieties of today.
Exactly, and if it was still there, it would still be on the list, wouldn't it? But I mean, I
Yeah.
know I have definitely seen on-farm mixes that are using older varieties, and they're cheaper. And you sit down and you work it out, they're cheaper because they are not using the latest recommendations. And ultimately, surely that's where people should be looking: is it on that list to be making their decisions as to what their mixes are?
No, exactly. You're right there. If it's not on the list, it's not on the list for a reason. If a mixture's are generally cheap for a reason as well, things. That's that old saying, isn't it? If it's too good to be true, it generally is. So, and it's false economy as well. We mentioned earlier that the grass seed part of a reseeding cost is a small part. So why scrimp on the seed when that's what's going to take you through to your final yield, and that's what you're investing in going forward.
And really, as I say, the difference can be £5-10 an acre, which really, as you say, compared to the overall cost is not a lot, but the return you will get on that will more than pay for itself.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you spread that cost out over the life of the lay, then it's nothing, is it? So that extra £5-10.
Exactly. But as you say, some do, and so be it. That's their choice. But obviously, we're here to try and make people think about what they're doing, why they're doing, and can they do it better? Because ultimately, if we can do that, then it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
I've just got a comment to make. That what you guys are speaking about. When I did research in Natal for 1987 around it, our professors actually taught us, because I was in the grassland department, so obviously we were very much into the pastures, more natural pastures. But they actually used to say to us, we're actually grass farmers who reap our product through our animals. And the minute you start thinking like that, that's actually when you get down to those basics, like what you guys are speaking about. If I've got my harvesters are big, tall, ranky Holsteins that are milking 13, 14,000, well, then I better cut the grass and take it to them. If I've got little Jerseys, then I can put them onto a pasture. So what you actually grow as a grass farmer is determined by how you're going to harvest it.
Yes.
I love what you guys are saying, because it's an absolute truth. Sorry.
Well, it is. I mean, the decision is, how do I put it, is down to where you are, what your production system is, what your soil is.
Like.
Everything, and what people also need to, I think, is worth recommending. I'm not trying to overwhelm the likes of Roger with questions and that from people, but a lot of the mixtures are, should we call them standard mixtures, aren't they? They are just off the shelf, they are available. But the likes of Roger, I'm sure, would be more than happy. You can put bespoke mixtures together for people to suit their situation, what their goals are, what their aims are. You don't have to use, just because it's off the shelf, you don't have to use it, do you?
No.
And those bespoke mixtures won't cost you any more. It's just relative to, more suitable to the system that you're what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, we can do bespoke mixtures, and that we have a good range of grasses in our sort of standard bar forage range, and that range is designed to hopefully cover all scenarios. But inevitably, not every farm's the same, not every field's the same, so we can do bespoke mixtures to suit.
But that's one of your roles, isn't it? Is to on farm and go and assess with the farmer and what he wants, and advise him on the right thing to be using.
That's right. Yeah, because it's no good planting a perennial or an Italian ryegrass on a sandy field that's going to drought out. So that's going to be pretty short lived.
Yeah.
Absolutely no point.
Yeah. Or on the alkaline part, that was quite interesting. Yeah.
Well, it is. It's everything. It's like everything. It's getting it right, and like you say, we ultimately are farming grass.
Yeah, we are.
And certainly down here in the southwest, we are in a great grass growing region. I say that given that we could do some rain, but I mean that is one of the joys of here, is we have a great natural grass growing area, and that's why there is a lot of dairy cows this part of the world, for that very reason.
And it's our job to breed the correct harvesters. as
Yes.
as in our genetic world. We
Yes.
have to breed the right ones. So you guys give us the grass we must grow, and then we must find the
Well,
Make
exactly.
the harvesters. Yeah.
Make the harvester. Yeah.
I was taught that a very long time ago because, as most people remember, you'd always have an argument between the geneticist and the nutritionist when they were lecturing you. And the nutritionist would say, we're the most important. And the geneticist would say, we're the most important. And eventually, I was pretty much taught doing the research and with beef cattle, actually, the guy said to me, we just grass farmers, mate.
I know.
We just grow grass.
Ultimately, everybody has their role in trying to achieve the best result.
But it starts at the soil and the grass.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So, I mean, we've talked about different mixes, the clovers. I mean, mentioning clovers, ideally, what people shouldn't be sowing them, by the end of August, probably the last time they sow them?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, particularly red clover, which is a little bit more sort of sensitive, for want of a better word. It wants to be sort of drilled into a good seed bed between May and August, and not too deep. Grass itself can, it only needs to be drilled. It's a small seed, so it only needs to be drilled no deeper than 10 mil. White clovers are a little bit more hardy. There's all sorts of stories how people get them into the ground from spreading them on lakes to chucking them in slurry tankers and broadcasting them. So,
well, that's what I was going to mention. I know myself, I had a lot of conversations last August with people going, oh, we've got a lot of weed. What do we do? It is possible to do it, isn't it? I mean, if you're doing a reseed, you can, if the weather's right, spray, put your reseed in, spray it now without clover, spray it now for your broadleaves. Spray it again in the spring for your broadleaves, and then whether it's after the first grazing, after the first cutting, you can put it on the back of a quad bike, in a slurry tanker. There's lots of different ways of getting the clover out there. It can be done. I mean, obviously, the reason people are concerned is the lack of effective clover-safe sprays out there, but it can be done. You can control your weeds the initial planting and the immediate period afterwards, and then put your clovers in afterwards.
You can't oversow anything with clover, can you? You can't put it onto grass lays.
Yeah,
you can.
That's what it is, isn't it, Roger? You can
minimal till then.
Yeah, well, you've got to do it. And Roger, please correct me, but you've got to get your grass depth. What's the word? You've got to get it down. So cut it or graze it, so it opens it up a little bit, and then put it on.
Need to reduce the competition for the new seedlings. So, and seed to soil contact, as with anything that grows, is key. So so if it can be harrowed and then broadcast the clover seed on, roll it in, that's ideal. So
okay, So, I mean, we used to put dry grass and clovers into kikuyu in South Africa to a degree.
Okay,
but I don't have enough knowledge to say exactly how that worked. But that's a try. You must have come across kikuyu in New Zealand. That sort of runner grass. That also.
Yeah, it was a long time ago when I was in New Zealand. So
it was a bit of a pest in New Zealand. We used to use it to graze with.
Very
hardy.
Yeah, in North Queensland we had it. In the tropics we had it.
Yeah.
On clovers, Persian clovers. Why don't we do more with Persian clovers?
Persian clover is an annual clover. It's sort of sits alongside sort of crimson clover, and the reason why we probably don't see more used in livestock systems is because it is a short-lived sort of species. So it's we have a couple of mixes, or a mix that does contain both crimson and Persian clover, and it does, it works well as a short-term catch crop in terms of producing some high protein silage for a year, and that can then be sort of grazed afterwards by store lambs, for instance. So the growth rates are improved by the higher proteins, but then they just die out, so they're not long-lived. But for a catch crop, and even now, there's a lot of talk about cover crops, and cover crops are used quite widely. It would make quite a good sort of catch cover crop type plant.
Okay, and it would also nitrogen fix, which would help. I mean,
exactly.
I came across it sort of riverine, northern Victoria. It was known as shaftal over there, and that's why I sort of looked it up. And I know I've done with a couple of farms over here. We tried it, and it seemed to work well. we put some Persian and some red together, so you got some of the Persian did reseed itself and it came through the second year, but you got that boost of protein that first year as the red was establishing itself, and then the red took over, and I just sort of surprised there isn't a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I suppose it's similar to vetch, really. I mean, we could use vetch in a similar way as a companion plant to establishing grasses. So you're getting that initial boost and the extra protein contribution to that first cut silage, and then when the vetch starts dying back, it's releasing, its roots are decomposing in the soil. It's releasing nitrogen for the grass going forward.
Yeah, okay. And then coming back to, I mean, last year I'd say I had a chance to visit your trial plot up in Worcester. You guys are doing some interesting stuff with tall fescues, which you're sort of rebranding soft fescues, if I remember right.
The tall fescues, we call them soft-leaved tall fescues.
Soft-leaved, yeah.
Yeah, and if you look, well, we mentioned the dry period we're having now, then tall fescues being much deeper rooted than perennial ryegrass. So if you think of a perennial ryegrass putting its roots down in a sort of top 15 to 20 centimeters, that's the part of the soil that's now baking out and drying out. A tall fescue can put its roots down to well over a meter. So and it has a big root biomass, so it's pulling moisture and nutrients and minerals from deeper in the soil profile, and it makes it much more drought tolerant. So
others have tried crossing fescues and ryegrass, haven't they? Which is where obviously Festuloniums come from. But I mean, I know I've seen myself on farms them only last as little as 6 months, and they were already falling away. But I mean, I certainly noticed, I remember last year there was obviously a lot of rust around last autumn given the conditions we were in, and yet the fescues didn't have the rust on them that the ryegrass did.
No, sorry, go on.
Is it a legume?
No, it's a grass.
It's a grass. So
yeah,
it doesn't put protein back in now. Sorry, I thought it was that. Yeah.
No, it's a grass. No, I mean, I think with the amount of stress that some of the perennials will be under with the dry weather at the moment, you don't get that from the tall fescues. They just continue to grow away, and they'll produce a hell of a lot more grass in these situations than Italians or perennials. They're high in digestible fibre as well, so there's a lot of nutrition within them.
I was going to say, how do they compare against a conventional ryegrass then, in terms of, you're talking about they've got deeper roots, they'll last longer, but where are their energy, where do they compare in that regard?
Yeah, I thought you might ask that. I should have been a bit more prepared on this one. I actually don't have any figures to hand on the quality. I should have pulled those up, but we can certainly source some of that for you. But in terms of,
I'm guessing ultimately not quite as good as what you.
No, it's probably not as high as a perennial, but it's not far behind. But if you're looking at wanting grass and producing grass to harvest in conditions like we've got now, or if you're on light land and perennials aren't performing for you, then tall fescues are a really, really good option.
I mean, I got to say I was impressed with what I saw last year, and I think it's something, as you say, given how the weather pattern seems to be in that I think we will see more fescues coming through again and being used on farm again. And I definitely appreciate that opportunity to have a look at them last year, and it was really interesting, actually. Really
on more sandy soil then.
No, well, it's the site that they were at Crockvale, our research farm near Evesham, is actually sort of heavier soil, but it does dry out quite a lot in summer, so you get massive drought cracks. So all varieties are tested in terms of their ability to perform from a disease resistance point of view, but also they are pushed to the limits. But it gives the tall fescues a chance to show their differences between other species.
But I guess what you're asking, Neil, what you're saying is, but they would suit a more soily.
Yeah, it's got a deep root system.
Yeah, system. Yeah. Would the fescues do better on a sandy soil than a ryegrass?
They would, very much so. Yeah.
I guess as we're sort of getting towards the end of this, Roger, any words of wisdom you want to spread to the audience?
Well, I would say just, if you're thinking about doing a herbal lay, keep it simple. But in terms of reseeding, we've talked about being grassland farmers, treat grass as a crop. But for me, it's attention to detail, really. And there's a lot of things you can do, little things that you can do that can make a big difference in terms of the success of a reseed. So look at the soil first. There's basic soil tests out there, but we're getting to the point now where we can look at so much more that's going on within the soil, and that can have a bigger benefit to the nutrient cycling ability of the soils, and therefore in terms of being more efficient with bagged inputs. So yeah, just keep that attention to detail up, and ideally we'd be plan ahead and plan to reseed about 15% every year to improve productivity.
Well, so, yeah, I mean, that's the figure I'm usually here, is sort of 15 to 20% effectively. Once every 5 years, you should be resowing every part of the farm, isn't it, effectively?
Yeah, that would be great if
I'd
we
say
could
that'd be your dream,
thinking.
wouldn't it? Keep you in business.
Well, we've all done a lot of research, but to keep the productivity moving forward on a farm and to keep that efficiency going, then that's unfortunately that 15 to 20% figure is the figure. So
exactly. Is the figure exactly. And any more questions from yourself?
No, that's great. That's great. I've learned a lot again. It's great to listen to grassland science again.
I guess
in a bit more detail.
I guess on that note, Roger, thank you very much for your time and for speaking to us on this podcast. So as per usual, if you'd like to contact us, the email is podcast@ChewintheCud.com, or you can now follow us on Twitter, so @ChewintheCudPod. And if you've got any questions, then please do send them to us. We're more than happy. And thank you for those that have listened to us so far, and welcome to season 1, real time with real people. So hopefully we'll have more of this moving forward. So thank you very much, and thank you, Roger.
Thanks, Roger.
No problem. Thank you very much.
And now for the really boring bit, I'm afraid, the legal disclaimer. The information provided during this podcast has been prepared for general information purposes only and does not constitute advice. The information must not be relied upon for any purpose, and no representation or warranty is given to its accuracy, completeness, or otherwise. Any reference to other organisations, businesses, or products during this podcast are not endorsements or recommendations of Chewing the Cud Limited. The views of Andrew Jones are personal and may not be the views of Chewing the Cud Limited, and the views of Neil Greggor are personal and may not be the views of Master Gen Limited and any affiliated companies. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.